Hey party people, back at it again here. So I'm lining this thing up to top dead center. I've cycled it around like twice and put the cam plate back in, the locking plate, it's all fully engaged. This Schwaben plate that I'm using is actually a different part number than the one that I've seen other people use. And the reason that I ordered this one is that the other plate that I'd seen people use, it looked like, sorry, there's too many shadows. It looked like the tolerance wasn't very tight. Like it was maybe just like a mil too thin, and so that seemed like there was too much play between when you put the plate in and you could advance or retard the timing just ever so slightly in either direction. So this one seems to fit really, really tightly. The problem I'm having is that when it says it's at top dead center, and I haven't taken the top cover off yet because I haven't released the tensioner because I was trying to figure out what's the baseline, like where I'm at from the factory. From what I know, this thing's never been torn apart. This was the original owner, 188,000 miles, and none of this has ever come apart. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like it's come apart, but from where my marks are on the adjusters to the marks that are on the casing for the, whatever that is, the we'll just call it the head. They line up perfectly up top, and the cam fit plates, this locking plate fits in snugly, and there's very little variance as one way or the other. But when I'm turning it to top dead center at the crank, as well as on this side, it's not really lining up the way I thought it would line up. So on the tooth that is shaved, which is the one that's obviously shaved down, you can see it looks like a triangle there. Can't hold three things at once here, but let me just try here. So this guy here is the shaved tooth. Well, that's supposed to line up with the split between the case, and it doesn't. It looks like it's almost like a tooth off. So I guess I'm going to find out when I take this chain off if this chain is actually stretched. I mean, I haven't heard of anyone's chains actually stretching that much to where it would be almost a full tooth out. So maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, but my teeth on these sprockets look pretty good. I mean, there's some wear, but nothing like I've seen in some of those pictures where like all the teeth are ground down to nubs. Then I would absolutely feel like, okay, this tooth down here at the bottom is out. But I can't imagine that that would have jumped up here. And if it had stretched that far, I feel like I would have gotten some codes of some kind, which I haven't seen any codes or, check engine lights or anything. So that's where I'm at. So I can't put that plate in if I turn this thing to where this tooth lines up where the case splits. So I'm kind of stuck. I guess I'm just gonna put the locking plate in where it is. It's all the way taut. Like, I can't put any more pressure on the crank. The cams are stopping it at this point, so there's no slack between the two, really, it doesn't seem like. I just wanted to point this out in case anybody else runs into this before they tear it down. So anyway, I'll have some more info to come. Okay, so as a follow-up here, I've rotated around several times trying to get this thing to line up. This is before I've taken the tensioner off, the upper tensioner, or the lower tensioner for that matter, just to see exactly where the marks line up before I take it apart. And with this plate in here, you can see that the tolerance on that plate is pretty tight. I mean, there's a little bit of edge there. I mean, you can see a little bit of daylight between on the retard side towards the rear of the motor, that there's a little bit of gap there, so that there's ever so slightly some space. I don't know if you can see that. And the other one is bottomed out, but this doesn't really line up that well with the marks on the flywheel. Well, not the flywheel, on the crank pulley over here on this end. I mean, that lines up pretty good. So that seems like it's on the mark. But it's not so straightforward as to rotate it around once and they all line up. I mean, I kind of had to back it off a little bit. So now I'm getting this tooth to pretty much line up with the split in the case there, which that's supposed to, you know, yeah. So that tooth, that ground down tooth there, the triangular one, is supposed to line up right on the split. That's as close as it'll come. So to me, that looks like it's a little bit off, but, well, it is a little bit off, I think, unless that's the way it's supposed to look. But see, it seems like it needs to go forward a little bit. Anyway, maybe that's just wear in all these components. So I guess it doesn't really matter ultimately. I just wanted to point it out. So I think ultimately, you know, again, no wear on these guys, at least not to the point where it would have jumped a tooth or anything, and I didn't get any codes. So I think this is just maybe worn a little bit, but I guess it doesn't matter as long as I put all the new stuff on and it's all to spec and I line all these marks up. I was just hoping to get some kind of baseline before I tore it apart so that I'd know, okay, well, even when I took it apart, this was not exactly lined up. So maybe people can comment and let me know if they've had similar experiences with this. Okay, cool. Okay, just thought I'd add a quick bit to the video here. So I was just putting on the lower timing chain and all the components. And if you look on the bottom, you're going to want to line up that tooth with that's ground down to like a triangle. That's got to line up perfectly with where the block meets that end bearing cap, I guess is what that is. So that's got to line up there, which, you know, depending on the angle you look at it, it's got to line up. And then the other sprocket up at the top has got to line up with that line on the intermediate shaft flange. And then you want to put on your, well, you obviously have to put on your timing chain guides or guide, and then the tensioner last. And I haven't unsprung it yet, but just wanted to kind of point out those areas before putting on the top chain. So I did have a bit of trouble trying to line up the intermediate mark with the teeth on the crank. It seemed like it was always off just slightly, so I had to make sure that that crank was really lined up well with the bottom to make sure it all aligned. But once I did, it seems like that's where it's supposed to be. So I will continue. Okay, so I got the upper chain on, and I took this apart and put it back together a couple times, just to see, you know, if I was getting it on there correctly and the easiest way to do it. To me, it seems like the easiest way to put this upper chain on is first put on the intake adjuster. So I took these out, right? Both adjusters off and cleaned them up. And then I obviously replaced these bolts with new because they're stretch bolts, so you can't reuse the old ones. But I put on the intake adjuster first with the timing mark, the arrow here lined up with that notch, and also lined up with that gold link on the chain. And then I just kind of fished the chain down to where the little sprocket is. And when I got that guy on, basically this was already lined up right from the lower chain, so there wasn't a whole lot to do down here other than just put that guy, slide it on. It only goes on one way. There's the notch that's in the bottom, fits into the keyed part of the bigger intermediate gear. But if you'll notice here, these three links, that this mark apparently is supposed to be in the middle of this one. And I've seen guys on other videos where they put it on and it's there. But I think that's just because the timing's, it's at a different rotation of the motor, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I know a lot of people have talked about this, but this is where this mark lines up here when I took it apart, and this was pointing at 12 o'clock. So, not sure what the deal is with these three gold links. I may do some more research here before I put it all back, put the covers back on, but at any rate, I put this guy on second, so I just slid this on, put a new bolt here because it's a stretch bolt as well. And then when I went up top, then I slid the exhaust cam adjuster on, and it fits just snugly if you've got this lower guide on, and you've got no slack here at the bottom, so it's super tight right here. So this one will automatically be tight because it's already clocked in the fully, I guess it's advanced. I mean, it's to the left. So when that's clocked all the way to the left and you put it on and it's all lined up, it's locked in place and it's going to be tight here, and then this will just push on, so it'll just slide in, and it's really taut, right? And then when you go to put the top one in, it's going to be taut as well across the top, and it'll just line up to allow you to slide it onto the cam and put the bolt in. And then obviously, you know, the tensioner doesn't have any tension on it, but I'll put the tensioner on when I get the top cover on. So at any rate, that seemed like the easiest way to do it, and then I went through and checked. Okay, I've got 16 links between the first gold one and the second gold one there, and that also lines up with the arrow that's on the top that then lines up with that mark on the timing assembly, whatever the hell that's called. I guess I don't have a Bentley, so I'm just doing all this stuff. I stopped buying manuals years ago for cars because it just kind of, you know, figure it out and make it work. At any rate, this thing went back together pretty easily. So there were some other write-ups and stuff online, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents as to how I put it back together. and what was the easiest way to do it. I also took out this variable valve timing adjuster. So it has like 4 O-rings on there, and I was trying to source those to see if I could replace them, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I checked with Volkswagen, they don't sell them, they just want to sell you the whole unit. I'm sure you could take those off and find them in a, you know, like a generic O-ring kit or something, but they're actually just ever so slightly different sizes, you know, graduated as they go in, they get smaller. I just took it out to make sure there wasn't any debris or any, a lot of people were complaining about the screen getting broken off and getting lodged in there. I didn't have any codes or anything before this, so, and this engine's pretty clean. It's changed with synthetic fluid its whole life, or oil. Anyway, good luck to everyone on the timing job. So I got everything lined up per spec, as we talked about in the previous part of the video, and rotated around 2 times, and the cam plate went back in. It was tight, it was really snug, but you know, I think that's good because it was kind of like tits on, so it should be really tight against the plate. And if you need to, you know, you can tweak this nut. Well, basically it's an adjuster on the cams, you know, one direction or the other. But I just wanted to point out that this thing did go back together pretty easily when you follow all the directions. Most importantly, locking out the cams, so making sure that this gear is, once you slide this in, that this is adjusted all the way towards the front of the motor. And same with the exhaust, all the way back towards the front of the motor, towards the front of the car. And you know, this will be super snug under here at this critical point below. Under the cam adjuster, under the first cam adjuster where the chain comes around, you want this point underneath there to be, that's not a very good view, but you want this under here to be very snug, very tight when you put it on. So as long as that's tight, you know, you've got your gear set up properly down below that. As long as this one is tight on the bottom when you wrap it, and it's snug in between here, and you've got 16 rollers between your 2 gold links, and you've got tension applied. So a little trick here that I did is, this is really what I wanted to point out, is that when I first set up the timing, I set it all up just like everyone described, but since I don't have a Haynes or Bentley manual, I was actually turning the crank clockwise from this end, which is counterclockwise from the pulley side. So that's a stupid fucking mistake. Don't make that mistake, because once you rotate it around, you're actually rotating it backwards, which won't hurt anything. But this phase adjuster here, then you're taking all the slack out of that, so then the exhaust cam ends up being like way off. So just keep that in mind. Like, that was like a very minor detail in the instructions that is obvious should be obvious to everyone, that you're rotating it clockwise from the pulley end. So clockwise from the pulley end, and everything's going to line up for you. But a little trick that I did to do that, because I am just one person, I don't have anybody here to help me, is that you have to apply tension to this top adjuster. And so normally they tell you to put the cover back on and put the bolt in, but I just took a similar bolt that I had that was the same thread, and went ahead and put it on. I just ran it into the place where the cover goes in, and then I just put like this tire iron in here to kind of wedge it so it's got tension. and it's kind of off to the side, so it's not touching the chain. But that actually helped a shit ton, because then I'm confident that the thing has got tension on it. I didn't have to put the covers back on and do all that craziness. And I was able to rotate it several times to triple check the timing. So anyway, don't be stupid like me and try to stick a bolt on, you know, I was sticking a bolt on this from the flywheel and just rotating it on this end, but you know, that only works if you're going clockwise on this side. You can't use that to go counterclockwise or unscrew. And I didn't have a bolt to thread in there with like 2 nuts or anything so that I could go the other direction. Although you could do that too. You could put, if you've got something that's the same thread, you could run it into one of those holes, you know, put like 3 nuts on the end of the bolt, and then you could end up turning it counterclockwise from this side if you're just one person, which is what I was trying to do. So if I had someone here from the beginning, it probably would have been a lot easier, because I wouldn't have resorted to doing stupid things that screwed me up. Anyway, cheers. Hope that helps somebody. Hey, so just wanted to give an update. I finished the timing and, you know, everything that was discussed earlier seemed to work out, particularly with this first cam adjuster here. As long as when you put it on first, so I wrapped the chain around the intermediate gear, wrapped the chain around this guy, making sure that this is phased toward the front of the motor, you know, clocked all the way forward when you wrap this chain around. And then same thing here on the exhaust side. You're gonna wanna, you know, clock it back towards the front of the car and then wrap your chain on. And then you wanna count your 16 rollers in between your 2 gold links if you have them, or if not, between these arrows and the one here on the timing assembly. So there should be 16 rollers. But one of the critical parts is that this part of the chain under here, just where it comes off of the guide, that's got to be super tight, snug, when you go to put this adjuster on. As long as it's snug underneath and it's snug in between here, and you've got tension on here when you're turning it, I actually put a bolt in there, an extra one that I had that was the same as the cover, and then put this tire iron in here just to wedge it in there, because I don't have anybody to help me, just to keep tension on it when I rotated it. And then the key here is clockwise rotation from the pulley side, not the crank side. You got to go clockwise from the pulley side. If you go clockwise from the crank side, it'll be counterclockwise from the other side, right? And it's gonna take your adjustment out of what you clocked it back this way. You're gonna lose that if the chains go in the wrong direction. So you'll end up with this intake cam being like way out. It'll be way advanced compared to the exhaust. So anyway, that's it, thanks. Okay folks, so weeks later, same shitty drop light. Just started it up. Full disclosure, I started up like a couple minutes ago, and I had to let the air purge out of the power steering. I just let it warm up to let all the air get out of the power system or power steering. I replaced some of those lines. They were worn down, completely rubbed a hole in it by the downpipe, because one of the exhaust hangers was missing. So that was a nice surprise when I found all the power steering fluid leaked out when I lowered the engine. At any rate, if you compare this noise to the beginning noise, I think it's much quieter. tap, 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 chain noise racket, gone. So the old pile of tensioners and gears that were replaced obviously did the trick, and the chain, whatnot. So if anybody else is having issues with the chains, or noise, that seems to be the fix. That's not news to anyone probably, but just wanted to document my experience with it. This job was way more hours than I thought it would be. I mean, I actually replaced my transmission with a used one, so I still have to take the test drive, otherwise I may be pulling it out again. Anyway, cheers. Tap, 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 chain noise racket, gone.